Hello and welcome to this special broadcast. It's been 1 year of the Israel attack and things have changed ever since. Today we have with us Ehsan Safarnejad, Iranian geopolitical analyst from Tehran, Iran, talking to us on the same topic. Welcome Ehsan, welcome to One India. How are you?
Quite well. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
Ehsan, my first question to you would be, given the escalating tension, do you think Iran is prepared to directly enter the conflict in Lebanon?
Iran is not really seeking to increase the tension in the region. Obviously, this is our region. We are indigenous to this place. Our prime minister isn't some guy whose last name is Mailkovsky and then change it to Netanyahu. We are indigenous to this region. And we prioritize peace and stability throughout the region as our number one priority. So Iran is not really keen on intervening in the conflict, but circumstances might change. The aggression of the Israeli regime is just so mind-blowing to the extent that they are constantly bombing in other countries. They have went on a rampage in Gaza. It was at first the city of Gaza in the Gaza Strip. Then they went to Rafah. Then they bombed Yemen. Then, they were bombing Hezbollah in Lebanon, in southern parts of Lebanon. And, all throughout this time, they were constantly bombing Syria. So at some point, the adventurism of this tyrannical regime, this ethno-supremacist regime, becomes somewhat hard to ignore. At the moment that they decide to directly attack Iran, I think it becomes inevitable for Iran to respond. At that point in time, I think that Iran will be ready to defend its territorial integrity and to protect its interests throughout the region.
Okay. Since you mentioned Hezbollah, there are reports, of instability with Hezbollah's leadership, especially after the targeted killing of their leaders by the Israeli forces. So tell me something, has the strength of the resistance weakened in Iran views, or what does this mean, like in a broader context, if we talk about the axis of resistance?
Well, General Soleimani, as one of the main commanders of the Axis of Resistance, the guy who hammered ISIS like no one did before him or has done ever since. He commanded something like 70 operations in Syria and 20 something in Iraq. So, I mean, this was a very integral person in the Axis of Resistance. He has this quote. He says, the opportunity that exists in what we consider as threats are even bigger than the circumstances which were considered as opportunity, right? So, opportunities lie, at every corner. And this is something that Axis of Resistance is very experienced in basically utilizing. You know, we are talking about Hezbollah. Let's remember how Hezbollah was born. Hezbollah was born out of a conflict. And then all throughout its lifetime, it was dealing with some sort of challenge. The identity of the group, the organization has emerged or has defined itself. The core value of this organization has been defined around this threat of Israeli aggression towards Lebanon. So this is not something that they weren't used to. Back then, when in its infancy, Hezbollah lost its leader, Sayyid Abbas Musavi. And then after that, a guy came to power in Hezbollah called Subhi at-Tufaili. Now, many analysts don't really talk about him. They just complete that chapter in the history. And they say that the Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was the second Secretary General of Hezbollah. They completely ignored this guy. But the truth was, for a time, Hezbollah had a leader who was, in a way, fundamentally against the core values of Hezbollah. Now, if you ask me which case is worse, having no leader or having a leader who is very keen on, sabotaging your movement, I would choose not having a leader and have, people just having a council, and that council, uh, you know, proceeding to determine the actions and the policies of the group. Hezbollah has a very robust structure. It was precisely due to the fact that it has 5 different councils in different areas, and the fact that it sort of has democracy within itself, within its members. Due to these reasons, Hezbollah doesn't face challenges the way that people think it would. And I can assure you that although the blow that has been dealt to them has been substantial, but it is not in any way, shape, or form fatal to the fate of the uh, resistance group.
Okay. So tell me, you know, like there are, we have seen that there's a lack of unified support from Muslim nations also, like for the Palestinian cause in this conflict. So why do you think many Muslim majority countries have not actively backed Palestine? And what does this signal for the, region's geopolitical alliance?
Well, one reason was due to the fact that all of this situation that we are seeing was long in the making. Let's remember when General Wesley Clark uh, basically blew the whistle on this sort of memorandum in Pentagon that United States plans to attack 7 countries in 5 years or 6 years, something like that. It was Yemen, Iraq, Sudan, Syria, and finally finish up with Iran. So all the countries that had significant power in order to oppose the killing, the murder, the genocide in Gaza by the Israeli regime, all of them have been first neutralized by United States, and now these countries don't really have that power because they are long before this happens, they have been neutralized. The other Arab countries in the region, the countries that are located around the Persian Gulf, they're mostly busy in what I call daydreaming. You have these uh, Ben Salman's vision of 2030, 2050 or something. And when you read those proposals for the future of Saudi Arabia, you see that they don't make sense at any level. Like these are just wishful thinking of a leader who wants to be something more than what he is, which is just a puppet of the United States. He's just a pawn in this like big chessboard that big players like Russia, China, United States, and like a regional country like Iran plays. They just move from one side to the other side. Saudi Arabia spent a lot of money on destabilizing Yemen, which would further the cause of the United States and the Israeli regime. Why did they do that? Because of the ambition of its leader, because of the fact that these countries owe their security to the United States. They have basically outsourced their security to the countries that are outside of this region, to the foreign entities in the region. And that's why they have to follow their plan. They have to basically basically manufacture the doctrine, create their doctrine around this question, how they can be useful to Americans so that the Americans won't abandon them. So
Okay.
when you do that, when you outsource your security, it becomes really hard for you to have an independent, original defense doctrine and foreign policy, which is unfortunately something that has been happening in Middle East and something that has happened to the countries in the region. Another reason is that the leaders who are in charge of these countries are they haven't been elected. They are inheriting the government through, you know, uh, through this royal blood. And, they don't really have the support of their own people, so they have to rely elsewhere. These are the main two reasons why the countries in the region, unfortunately, have been procrastinating and in some instances have been going against the benefits of the Palestinian people in general.
So you're saying that it is because of the outsourcing of the security and the defense from the, let's say, bigger players like US, and not due to the Shia Sunni divide, because there are speculation about the same.
Well, look, uh, I can tell you that, religion can fool a lot of people who don't know the politics. But when talking about politics, the leaders don't really talk about religion that much. They talk about the corridors, natural resources, the security of their country, their borders, their access to the open sea. These are the things that they talk about. Uh, Religion is one aspect of it. I'm not going to completely deny this facet of this conflict that is a sectarian matter. But considering how people have been supporting one another, I would say that this is sort of like a project rather than inherent and innate difference between two fractions of the society in the Middle East. If we consider the entirety of the Middle East as a community, there isn't that difference between the people. And you could see that clearly manifest itself and show itself when people, more specifically the Sunni Arabs in the region, cheering on when they saw the Iranian ballistic missiles over the skies of the occupied Palestine. So that's not as big of an issue as people make it to be. And I have seen weird things. So there are these groups that are agent provocateurs, both in the Shia community and in the Sunni community. But funnily enough, despite the fact that, for example, those agent provocateurs in the Sunni community insult the high figures of the Shia community, and the Shia community does it, I'm referring to those agent provocateurs, not the entirety of that community, do the same thing to the Sunnis, but these two groups somehow are best friends. Just it doesn't make sense whatsoever if you want to look at it as genuine hatred and resentment towards the other side. Well, if you hate the other side so much, then why is it that you are buddy with this other guy who insults the high figures of your own sect? So it is clearly a plan. There is money involved, and religion has been weaponized by the intelligence communities of the Western countries in order to sow distrust and the seed of difference, resentment between the people of in the region, between the people of the region. But fortunately, uh, you know, obviously, what has happened in Gaza has been very traumatic and tragic. But I mean, if you want to look at for some silver lining in this entire tragic scenario, is the fact that people are finally waking up to the truth and the reality of the circumstances that they have been dealing with by coming together, by seeing the videos of Sunni scholars going viral on social media, thanking the Shia community for the help that they have provided their Sunni brothers in Palestine, and more specifically in Gaza, because in their logic, Yemenis, the Iranians, the Iraqis, the Lebanese, these people who are fighting the Zionist entity and supporting the Palestinian cause, they are all they have all one thing in common, and that's the fact that they are Shias. So it means that the Shias are not really invested in, you know, sort of like throwing the gas into this fire of sectarianism. They're more interested in unity, in helping their brothers, helping the oppressed people of Palestine.
Okay. Okay. Um, quite understood. Tell me something that you know, as an average Iranian person, who's living in Iran, what does for you is to think of this war? Like, how does or what does an average Iranian think of this ongoing war between the two countries?
Well, um, the people are making jokes, right? So this is one thing that the Iranians do. They have this very strong sense of humor. And from time to time, they nag, they complain. But I would say that in everyday life, you see people doing exactly what they were doing before. I mean, Iran is not the occupied Palestine. Iranians are not living in the same fear that the Israelis are living in. We don't go to the bunkers. We don't queue up uh, behind the closed doors of the big supermarkets trying to hoard stuff and store food in fear of an imminent Israeli attack. Everyday Iranians living their normal life, and sometimes they make jokes, sometimes they make say things. Oh, I mean, God forbid that Israel attack us, but it's all in passing voice, and there is not really genuine fear behind what they say. Again, the supermarkets are full of food. There is no shortage of anything. Uh, the economy is bad right now, so I mean, in that aspect, there is not much to say. But people are doing what they were doing before the October 7th, before before 13 months ago. Uh, Everything is business as usual in Iran.
So you're saying things are pretty much as they were before, like a year ago in Iran, and nothing much has changed between this war, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me something. This is not what I am saying, but it is something that Netanyahu said, that is Hezbollah a proxy of Iran? What do you have to say on this?
Look, there is this group in Lebanon. It's called Qavat al-Lebananiya, and they have a strong relationship with the United States and the countries of the Western Hemisphere, the NATO countries in general. When you compare the capabilities of Qabat al-Lebananiya with Hezbollah, you see the difference and how apparent it is. Hezbollah currently manufactures drones that Russia had to pay money in order to purchase. They are purchasing it from within the Lebanese border because Iran was kind enough to transfer technology to Hezbollah. Now, this is something that you do with your allies, with your strategic allies. It goes to show you that the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah, despite the fact that it's not a state actor, it's an organization, that bond is very strong, right? If you talk about the capabilities that Hezbollah has, the help that they have received from Iran, for example, there was, I think it was 2 years ago that Lebanon was dealing with fuel shortage. And considering the fact that, almost every Lebanese has to rely on generators, power generators in their home in order to have electricity, uh, and, because the government doesn't have like powerful power plants in order to procure people with the electricity that they need, they have to rely on fuel and they have to do it in their own home. Iran agreed to send fuel to Lebanon, basically basically receiving their money which was devaluated at that time to hell and back and was, in a way, worthless. So these are the things that you do with your allies. What really blows my mind is the fact that the countries that have went against their own security interests, the countries that have sold the interests of their own people, are being called by United States as Western ally. Meanwhile, genuine partnership that has resulted in fruitful, tangible outcomes, resulted in things that we can calculate, we can see, we can measure. Those relationships have been described by the Western communities, by Western media, with words that are derogatory. They call the Iranian allies in the region proxies. In Iran, if the police comes out in the streets, Iran, then, the Western media calls it a police state. But if the same thing happens in the United States, then it's law and order. You can't have disorder in the United States. You can't have chaos. When they torture people, they call it enhanced interrogation techniques. The rich people inside Russia, China are called oligarchs. In the United States, despite the fact that their wealth is sometimes bigger than the entire GDP of some countries, they are being called entrepreneurs. So when you see this trend, this is not just the fact that they call the Hezbollah organization a proxy for Iran. This is actually a bigger trend, which is the weaponization of language by the Western media. There is no journalist in Western societies. I'm referring to mainstream media. They're mostly, there is this sort of play on words in Iran. We call most of the journalists in Western Hemisphere, we call them Sarbaz Khabarnagar. And Khabarnagar means journalist, press. Call them press soldiers of the press. And because that's what they do, they go and use, behind every word, there is an apparent and clear objective in order to demonize the independent countries, the emerging countries, the countries that are challenging the unilateralism by United States and trying to usher in a new age of multipolarity. All of them, are being dehumanized and antagonized by these Western supposed journalists, stenographers with power. And, it's just a matter of time before they decide that they don't like your country and come after you. And then you will then hear them talk about your country in the most derogatory, hateful manner, which you would have previously thought it to be impossible. So we don't really take these people seriously. We don't take this rhetoric seriously. Everybody in Iran and Lebanon understand that, this is a bilateral relationship. We help them, they help us. We are pursuing common goals. In some areas, we have difference of opinion. For example, Hamas. In Syria, the Iranians, the Hezbollah organization, and Hamas, we had different viewpoints on what should happen. So this is not, but funnily enough, again, there is zero disagreement between the countries of NATO when it comes to Ukraine. How odd. We are vassal state. We are proxies of one another. We are selling the interest of our own people for the sake of the others, supposedly, how it is described by the Western outlets. But then we have disagreements within ourselves. A healthy amount of disagreement is integral to having an organization that functions the way that it is supposed to. But funnily enough, there is zero disagreement between the NATO countries. And somehow they're considered an alliance rather than all of them being proxy of United States.
Okay.
Even if that means your pipeline, Nord Stream 1 and 2, being blown up by United States, even then the Germany is called a US ally, not a US proxy.
So, because we are, running short on time, I'll ask you one last question, which is, Iran was criticized for delayed attacks earlier. So, has Iran now made up their mind about this whole war situation?
I mean, the Iranian leader performed the Friday prayer after the Iranian attack on Israel. And in that prayer, he gave a lecture, as it is customary in performing the Friday prayers in the Islamic culture. He said, "We do not uh, really try to, we are not really in a hurry, and we are not in the business of procrastination either. Neither procrastination, neither being in a state of hurry. We act when we deem an opportune time to act." And this has been one key part of the Iranian foreign policy, one part of the Iranian security doctrine that has always been integral, to the whole modus operandi by which Iran defends and protects its territorial integrity. So I would say that Iran will continue the way that it was, continue this sort of framework under which it was pursuing its objective of helping the Palestinian people. Uh, there was, I told this on another show somewhere else. Uh, there was this agreement between the Russian Federation and the Israeli regime that, because the Russians are in Syria, because of the port that they own, the port in Tartus, the naval port that they have, the agreement was that the Russians would prevent Iranians from, venturing deep into the southern parts of Syria, which is adjacent to the occupied Palestine, aka Israel. There was that agreement between the two sides. What Iranians simply did was to wear the uniform of the Syrian Arab army, the Syrian government's army, and the Iranian generals can be seen in multiple pictures wearing the Syrian Arab army uniform. So it is not the fact that Iran is not involved, but the fact that Iran is not really in the business of going around and advertising everything that it is doing. Even in the assassination of Secretary General of Hezbollah, there was this figure that was completely absent in the Western media, and that was General Abbas Furushan. He was the commander of Quds Force operation in Syria and Lebanon. I don't remember people really talk about him in the media, but he was there helping the Hezbollah organization, helping the leadership in Hezbollah. So Iranians are always there. It's just a matter of time that it's just a matter of not really being that interested in showboating or, advertising the way that we operate. Uh, this is not the way that the Iranians behave. We don't really, we're not the best in media warfare, but in this one instance, I actually agree with the policy that Iran has, which is not really to go around and advertise every little move that it does.
Well said, actually. And I hope that, you know, people uh, understand this whole situation. And what's your take, your personal take on the ongoing war? As in, um, do you see a peace treaty coming soon, or do you think that this war, the ongoing war, is gonna go further or escalate further?
Well, um, every time that peace uh, comes in the discussion, a ceasefire, a peace treaty comes into the discussion, I think there is this kind of negligence towards the fact that every conflict has two sides. And, not unless both parties decide to put an end to everything that is happening, no ceasefire, no peace treaty, nothing of that sort can be accomplished by the actions of the Zionist regime, by the rhetoric that they use in their media. I can say one thing for sure, and that's the fact that the Israelis are not ready in any shape or form to have to negotiate any real peace treaty. They are seemingly now not least bit worried about the hostages that are held by Hamas. They are not interested in managing the escalation in the region and preventing the war from expanding to other territories. In fact, they are opening new fronts in Hezbollah while they are stuck in Gaza. They have failed to accomplish their objectives in Gaza. They are lashing out on the innocent Palestinians, but in terms of the military objective, it is very hard for me or anyone else who is closely monitoring the situation in Gaza to actually understand what the Israelis are trying to accomplish. It has become that bad that we are now even questioning, okay, you are carpet bombing the entire city blocks. Now there are not really that much left in order for you to bomb. So what's next? What are you going to do? What is the objective of doing this? What is the objective that you have by going into Lebanon? You said that you were going to basically bring the people who left the northern parts of the occupied Palestine, the northern parts of Israel. They were forced to relocate to southern parts of the occupied Palestine. You said that you're going to go to a war with Hezbollah in order to bring these people back to their home. But now that hasn't been accomplished, and there is no clear roadmap as to how you're going to achieve it. It's just constantly declaration of war against one country or another. While you are stuck with Gaza and Lebanon, you're not talking about opening up a new front against Iran. Obviously, you're constantly bombing Yemen, so those guys are annoyed at you as well. So, there is no clear objective that is apparent to anyone who is following this. And this becomes very hard because in negotiation, you try to find out what the other side wants from you. And in this instance, you don't see any reason, any logic to this senseless bloodshed, which makes the job of the negotiators very, very hard because they don't know what they should offer to the other side so that it would put an end to the genocide. So no, unfortunately, my view on this is very pessimistic. I think that any peace treaty, any ceasefire would only be achieved through military means. If Hamas succeeds, they can have a peace treaty, they can have a ceasefire. But if they don't succeed, then Israel will continue to do what it does, uh, you know, every day, basically for the past 360 something days, close to a year.
Okay. Very well put to your thoughts. And thank you so very much, Ehsan, for connecting with us and talking to us on One India and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks for inviting.